Morgan, where are we?
Actually, I have no idea where we are. I've taken this road like 10 times and I have no idea where we actually are.
Okay, what kind of car are we in?
We're in a Ford Focus ST. Jeez, David.
They have sensitive brakes. Jenny's back there too. Say hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Okay, so the point of this video is from somebody who came from a completely different platform that I guess you could say is in the same class, price point. Yeah. Would you say?
It's a little bit cheaper for like the standard car, but like all modifications in it's about the same.
Okay. You went from the yellow bug eye that was on the channel about 2 years ago now, which is crazy. Yeah. But now you're in this wonderful Focus ST. And I'm not gonna have any bias in this conversation. That's why Morgan is gonna tell the story. So, because I've always loved the Focus ST, it is sad that they are gone now. But at the same time, I love Subarus too. They're just very different in a lot of ways. But how would you describe owning the Subaru versus owning the ST? And why did you make the jump from the Subaru to the ST?
So let me preface this by saying I love Subaru as a company. I love the WRX, love the STI, I love the Legacy, especially the GT. Nothing against Subaru. This is more against my personal car and my lack of expertise, I guess, on the platform at the time.
What are you saying?
That I was dumb was someone else's project. It already had a decent amount of stuff done to it terribly. It all needed fixing, but it was, the platform was there. Already had the motor replaced, intercooler, a bunch of other visual stuff. And I bought it trying to fix someone else's projects, not having to start from scratch. Terrible idea.
Never do that.
Never do that.
No matter what car it is, never do that.
It was pouring oil out. It was a miserable excuse for a car. And I got it to where it was pretty fun, pretty drivable. Big turbo, well, bigger turbo. And it was a fun car, but I spent upwards of probably $15,000 getting that thing 350 horsepower, 450 foot-pounds of torque, and maybe 2 or 3 grand of that was on stuff other than performance, like coilovers, appearance stuff, like that. So all in all, I probably spent $12,000 to jump from whatever the stock bug eye is to 350 horsepower. Didn't really get to have fun on it as much as I wanted because I had done so much to it that it was like, okay, let's go out, let's drive to work. I hope nothing breaks this time, or what's going to break this time.
I think all of us can feel that a little bit.
And I had toyed with the idea of getting a daily and just fully building that car out, which I actually really close to do. And at the time I worked for a basically a bank. It's a credit union, and they teamed up with a bunch of different car sales places like Carvana and a couple other places like that. I could look through the inventory and see before anyone else like some of the cars that come in, and I had looked at multiple things, S2000s, newer Miata Indies, the Abarth 124 Spider I actually got really close to buying.
I thought the Abarth was way overpriced.
Yeah, and they wanted an extra $4 grand to ship the one I wanted from California here, and another $4 grand to ship one of the ones in Georgia back to California to replace it.
Sorry.
It ended up being something like $600 a month to finance with really good credit.
Is your turbo system now a complete kit, or is it just the turbo itself?
No, it's a complete kit. Garrett makes the turbo a direct bolt-on replacement, and then a couple of the small pieces I pieced together. I actually bought the turbo from a friend of mine who just wanted basically an even bigger one.
HKS power. Oh, snap and crackle and pop.
It'll make about 400 horsepower when the tune is done.
Right. I think we were going to the airport or something. I can't remember what we were doing. We were on some kind of road trip together. I think one day you were like, yeah, I'm thinking about spending, like, I think it was some atrocious number. Oh. It was like $13,000 on making your Subaru bulletproof or something. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, I can have 400 horsepower. And finally one day I was like, Morgan, I'm your friend, but why?
I love you, but you dumb, man.
Why? And you're like, but no, it'll be reliable. I'm like, no, it won't. And you know, I was just trying to give you some tough love, and especially with somebody like me who's been extremely spoiled with, like, you know, the Coyote motor and stuff like that, where I barely have to spend any money to make horsepower. I'm like, Morgan, there are other platforms out there. Maybe you should, like, give it a try. I feel like I put that in your head, like, give something else a try.
Yeah.
Because you're having so much trouble with your stuff, and I felt so bad. And yeah, of course, project cars break, but there comes to a point where your money per performance dollar is not being
like
met.
Turbo went out, so replaced the turbo. Clutch went out, replaced the clutch. Flywheel went out, replaced the flywheel.
Right.
Then I ended up having to replace half the internals in the transmission. It was nonstop. I was on one of the car pages, and we had, on the front page was an RS, and I was like, hey, don't they make a little bit cheaper?
G-forces. They had the RS, which is a great car in itself, but the ST was much more available to people overall. It didn't have the crazy markups that other people had.
Yeah, that was in the time that markups were still astronomical.
Ridiculous.
I looked at the same site, and sure enough, they had brought in an ST that day, within the hour. So I called them up while I was at work, and I was like, hey, can I test drive this, or when can I look at it? And they're like, we'll drive it over to you for lunch, and you can test drive it on your lunch break. I said, solid, let's do it.
Yeah.
Do anything, and it's 1 PSI, 1. Showed up, and I was like, this is kind of an interesting car. It was just a standard black, completely stock Focus. I mean, it still had plastic covering over all the radio and the gas pedal, but it had like 40,000 miles. So the guy obviously didn't drive it as a sports car. I don't know if I really want to spend this much money on a car when I already have so much money invested in the other car. I would maybe just get something cheap, like just a Miata and the Daily.
Right.
And I thought about it, and I was like, I wonder what all you can do to these cars. And I looked them up, and I was like, oh my gosh.
The aftermarket's massive.
And everything is so cheap comparatively. Just unbelievably cheap.
And then you can do fun things.
Full bolt-ons. Full bolt-ons. It's like 300 horsepower, 400 foot-pounds of torque with E30, and it costs like, if you shop around, you can get it for less than $1,500.
Right, and well, I just remembered seeing the progress of your Subaru versus the progress of your Focus. I felt like I blinked and your Focus was pretty much done.
They're never gonna fall for this. If this works, then that's kind of my, I guess, sign, you could say, that I should get this car. I said, I'm not gonna put any down. You're gonna give me basically a 0% interest rate. It's like 0.4.
That's ridiculous, yeah. You stole that car.
You're going to fit, there was 2 dents on it. I was like, you're going to fix those, and you're gonna knock $2,000 off the price, and you're gonna tax, tag, and title it out the door. So out the door, I paid less than 14 grand for it with 0 down.
What?
And I was like, there's no way they're gonna fall for this. This car is pristine, with the exception of those 2 little things. I mean, they've had it for less than an hour. They know they're gonna sell it. It's not gonna happen.
Then fate decided.
And a day later, they called me up and they said, you have a deal. If you can deposit 100 down, just so we can actually say you did do something,
$100?
We'll agree to everything else.
$100?
$100.
You put down an Xbox Special Edition game for a car.
So now I gotta decide, am I gonna daily this, or am I going to sell the Subaru and just do everything to this right away? And initially I decided, let's make a fun car that's reliable, that does everything I want it to. And so I sold the Subaru, and probably for a good bit less than I should have.
The only real big issue you've had with the car was a head gasket recently. But wait, before everybody goes, oh, it's because it's a Ford. No, it's because Morgan here was accidentally pushing 38 to 40 pounds of boost, and the motor survived and was unscathed.
The motor was perfect, with the exception of a 0.2 variation in the head, which cost me like $60 to deck. If you blow a head gasket in a Subaru, then you basically rebuild.
Yeah.
Like David here.
Third gear just rocks in this car. Third gear is magic gear in this thing.
First gear and second, you basically just have to like...
Nothing happens,
you have
really.
To,
you have to like...
really, it's either all slip or no power.
It's funny, because then in third you feel the car go, finally, I'm happy.
The turbo in it now is Garrett's Gen 2 GTX 2867R. Hooray! Spool's a little later than the stock one, but where the stock one has really fast spool and instantaneous torque, it falls flat on its
Oh my
face
god, like
and
right when you hit like 4,000 RPM, it's
just,
like,
yeah. This one pulls solid all the way to red line.
It feels like it pulls harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, it holds it like nothing else.
It's wild because you've been just logging and logging and logging.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny how easy it is to log a car nowadays.
Yeah.
Like you were driving to my house. Hey David, what's up, dude? I don't know, you wanna go to the store? Yeah, hold on, let me log. Beep.
It's like my tuner just threw me a new log, let me put it on.
Compared to even 5 years ago, where you had to have your laptop and everything.
Oh my gosh, it's just press a button now. My tuner is, I just messaged him last night. I was like, man, I just want to thank you. You've been so much help. Every time I have a question, he answers. It could be like 4 a.m. on a Sunday, and that dude answers me sometimes. There's memes of him at vacation sitting on a beach, and he's just like
on his laptop,
like tuning.
Is that JST?
Yeah, it's JST. Okay. Brian Tyson at JST. He's a god.
He has such a great reputation here in the Georgia area, especially.
He kills it. If his shop wasn't 3 hours away from me in Dublin, I would probably be there every week.
To this day, if you were to recommend, say, the Subaru versus the ST aftermarket-wise, what do you think is the right path overall?
This is a hard question for me because I think Subarus are fantastic with stock to a little bit modified. I know one person that has a built motor that hasn't blown it at least twice.
That shouldn't be a thing, you know.
That's not really on Subaru. I mean, you're pushing a car so much past its limit. Most of the people that build these motors, while yes, they may know what they're doing, they're not guys that were trained specifically for that car.
Right.
I think if you keep a Subaru moderately stock, they perform amazingly for what they are, and especially in autocross.
Oh, they're great.
The stock all-wheel drive class, you can decimate. If you want to really go hard on something, this is weird because no one ever does it. I honestly would get the ST, even the Fiesta ST. That car is a go-kart.
That car is great.
I had so much done to my Subaru and no one paid it at the time of day. Because at the end of the day, it was just another Subaru. It wasn't bagged. It wasn't anything crazy.
Right.
You do like minuscule stuff to one of these cars and everyone's like, holy crap, I've never seen that car. Like, the stuff done to it.
Yeah.
Everyone does the same thing. They do stage 3 bolt-ons and
some suspension,
which isn't bad. It works great.
Yeah, but I mean, you had the whole package. So you've done the wrap, you've done the wing, you've done the diffuser, you've done the modification to the turbo. You've done so much of this car in such a little time that I think
just under a year. I
think it gave people the impression of, oh wow, you really can make these your own. Because I will say though, there is a lot of times you'll see like ST clubs and stuff like that. This is me saying as an outsider. When you go to an ST meet or something, everybody's car looks the same.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I feel like there could be more, you know? And when you showed up, when it was blue and the wing on it and everything, I was like, wait a minute, that's a thing?
Yeah.
All right.
They're huge in Europe, and there's tons of stuff done in Europe, but for some reason they just never really caught on in the States, and I guess that's probably part of the reason they cut the...
It is the reason. I mean, it's so funny because they're like worshipped in Europe.
Yeah.
And over here, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the Focus badge name. Maybe it's something along those lines. I think a lot of it,
I think one, it was kind of competing with the GTI, which already had a pretty heavy foothold in
Very
America.
Established name here.
And Ford in the US didn't get off on a good foot when it came to their hatchbacks.
I remember when this car came out in particular, people were losing their mind. Journalists were losing their mind over this car. I do remember the first Focus ST I ever reviewed, he ended up going and buying an STI later.
Yeah.
He was like, oh my God, I love this so much more. And I was like, oh, I can see that. But it really did come down to preference.
Yeah.
You know, it really does. But
I know people that have gone from these to STIs and WRXs, and I know just as many people that have done the opposite. It's weird how interchangeable these cars are. And then I know a couple people that have gone from these to like Z06s and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's just not fair.
My opinion is, if you want to fully build a car to a max horsepower, do not build a Subaru. That's like, I think that is my personal opinion.
Unless you want to go a professionally built motor from Cosworth, basically.
Which is 30 grand.
Which I have one friend that has that motor, and he is the one friend that has never blown his engine.
But I drove Cosworth Motor 1 in a Outback 3 years ago, and it didn't feel that much different. You know, it was like 450 horsepower. I was like, why is this motor, why is this block $20,000? Like, no, absolutely not. So that gave me perspective on building a Subaru, and I just wasn't a fan of that idea because I feel like people can spend their money differently. But like you said, near stock, just like the Evo, freaking great. they're awesome. You build a car, you should see the progress. You shouldn't have to take 2 steps back. And your car is like taking 10 steps forward, I feel like. Every time I see you, there's something different about it.
Nice to not have to worry about what's going to break next. Like, be able to have a car, get on it, and have much less fear of really driving the car.
I just love, like, it has that violent torque steer sway.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God.
It just sounds like this baleful roar of just something, like, evil. It's mental sounding.
But on another note, I upload every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Peace.